And we're live. All right, awesome. Well, welcome everybody in the chat. Waiting. We had about 60 people waiting for this, so pretty exciting. We have three recruiters today with us, and welcome everyone to the Codecademy live discussions that we have once in a while here on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. Do we want to go around the room introducing ourselves? Harmeet, you go first.
All right. My name is Harmeet, and I'm a technical recruiter at Codecademy. I am hiring some engineering managers right now, but typically I hire engineers across the board. That is me, and I'll pass it to Victoria.
Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria. I'm also a technical recruiter here at Codecademy. I started in June. Loving it. I mostly focus on IC roles and software engineering and also cybersecurity. So we just hired 2 team members in cybersecurity. They'll be starting this month. So woohoo, exciting stuff. Passing the baton to you.
Cool. My name is Will. Hi, everyone. I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts. I work here at Codecademy as well on the technical recruiting team, mostly helping build out some of our product engineering teams, also help on the curriculum side, so the folks that actually build out the courses that people learn. And so I've been here around the same amount of time as Victoria. And so, yeah, looking forward to chatting.
Awesome. And I'm Fede, and I'm with the community team, and I'll be your host today, trying to moderate the chat. And like I posted in the chat a few minutes ago, anyone watching, if you have questions for our participants today, please save those questions for the end. We'll make sure that we have time for Q&A. So write them down or keep them in your mind, and we'll go through the chat later to answer all your questions. So to get started today, we thought that would be interesting to have kind of like a 3-part discussion where we talk about how you find jobs, or where's the best places that you can do right now, that you can go right now to find your job, tech jobs. How, once you found those jobs, how you stand out from the competition and for all the people that are applying for the same jobs. And finally, part 3, which is sort of, okay, so if you already know where to look for jobs and you already know how to stand out or how to be a good candidate, then how do you know what job to apply for? Because at the end of the day, it's as much a question of where you want to work as it's a question of how good of a candidate you are. So let's get started, the 3 of you, with where to look for jobs. What would you say, dying to know, what are the best places to look for jobs? Is there any job board that is killing it right now? Is there any place, any website, word of mouth? If your uncle works somewhere, is that the best? Is that I want to learn.
I'm interested, Harmeet and Will, what you guys think on this, because I think referrals are the best. Like you said, your uncle works here, your cousin, twice removed. I'm going to say that referral based goes a long way. I always check referrals first when through applications, or if somebody, I have this great candidate. So I'm interested what you guys have to say about the job boards, Will and Harmeet.
I would agree. I would agree, Victoria. Definitely, referrals definitely stand out. They go to the top of the pile in terms of who you're going to check out and, could give a consideration to. Usually they'll at least get a phone call. So yeah, personal networks and stuff like that. Definitely a great place to look in terms of, asking around, seeing if people can forward resumes on and stuff like that. Because yeah, whenever they come across our desk, it's definitely something that stands out to me. Personally, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, just searching. And so I know that Codecademy, we post our jobs on LinkedIn as well as our career page. So if a job seeker is looking, they know, hey, this is a company I definitely want to work for. Any major company that has an online presence will have a careers page where they can go that'll have active job postings, and usually those will link right to they'll come right to our desk basically. When we get an applicant or a referral, they'll come to one of our systems that kind of comes right to our inbox. And so whether you apply, that's a debate, like whether you want to apply on a job board or whether you want to apply directly through a company's website. I don't know if it matters too much, but usually between LinkedIn or definitely the careers pages, that's usually where I'd be kind of looking to source candidates from anyways. I don't know, Harmeet, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think you both hit on great points. Referrals are huge for sure. If you know someone who works at a place that you really want to work at, that's probably your best way to at least get your foot in the door, get an interview, get the first interview, right? So everyone's got an uncle, an aunt, or a friend or, you'll walk someone's dog on occasion, whatever it may be. Really scour through your network to leverage anybody who can help you out. A good thing is to like connect with all those people too on LinkedIn, because if you're looking at jobs on LinkedIn and you see that one of your connections works there, why not ask them, hey, like, I'm looking at this job. Could you help me out? Would you be able to refer me? The worst that they can say is no. So you got to turn over any stone possible. So those two, LinkedIn and referrals, are huge. Google searches for sure. Just Google search like the types of jobs you want at the companies that you want. That's going to be huge as well. It's a great avenue, but leveraging your personal networks is probably your best bet. And if you don't have a personal network, try building it. Go to events, go to conferences. There's a lot of free events and conferences, and just talk to people. And it'll be really easy to talk to people if you're going to events that you're actually personally interested in, right? So it's not like it just makes it a little easier when you know about the subject matter and you can strike a conversation that way.
Right. I agree. I mean,
it's interesting that you guys bring up this point of referrals, because I know that a lot of times we mix up the two of how you showcase your portfolio and how you get experience if you've never worked as a dev before. And it's kind of like that problem, like, I don't have experience, I can't get the job, and I can't get the job if I don't have the experience. And oftentimes I hear that the solution to this is kind of a combination of participating in communities or online open source projects that will give you some exposure to what would look like experience. And then at the same time, you get to meet the people in those communities that might have jobs in tech companies or might have, a foot already in the door, and they can help you if you make a good impression with them. So it's sort of it seems like we are talking about different things, but it's all connected in like how it all plays out in your favor at the end.
For sure, Faye. I think you definitely nailed it, especially with like, what Harmeet was saying, because as you're getting started, I remember when I was early on in my recruiting career, I didn't know any software engineers, and I had to meet them online, or I had to meet them through conferences, or I had to go to networking events. And, over years, it eventually, the network gets bigger. But when you find those commonalities, things that you have in common with people, like you went to the same conference, it's okay to reach out to them even on LinkedIn and say, hey, looking to build my professional network. I'm not saying spam random people. That's not a good idea. You'll not get the success you're looking for that way. But if you find people that either went to the same boot camp that you did, or that went to a conference that you did, finding those commonalities and then just being proactive and reaching out, even if you've never had a one-on-one conversation. Sometimes just, building those LinkedIn networks, because when we post a job, if I post a job today, it'll get posted to my immediate network, and then some more of like their first degree connections. And so the more connections you have, even if you don't know these people directly, the more opportunities you're going to see, just different jobs, different other people to connect to. It really can kind of snowball. But yeah, the networking is something that never really stops, but it's daunting to start. But once you just get it snowballing, it gets easier, I assure you.
Well, I mean, I think some of the questions that people tend to have are things like, well, I don't want to cross any red lines. I don't want to have any red flags. Like, if I know someone at the company and I ask them how the recruiting process is that a red flag? Is that, something, is it inappropriate? It seems like sometimes people have this kind of fear of like not asking too many questions or try to be too prodding, because it might come across as a bad sign. And I guess that's just kind of like a hard line it depends on each company. I guess it has different policies on this, on how transparent they are with the application process.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of different companies have a lot of different strategies. For us at Codecademy specifically, we're very much willing to like let you know what's involved in the interview process, what the next step is going to look like. And we often do prep calls for final interviews as well. So for us, we're very, very open in terms of the process. And there are a lot of companies who are open to letting you know about the process and what's involved in the interview loop for that particular company. But there are some companies, maybe they won't give too much information or divulge, but the only way you're going to find out is if you ask. So don't be afraid to ask.
All right. That's I'll take that in mind. I'll keep that in mind. So, so we're talking about job boards, and it seems like LinkedIn, it's a pretty strong tool right now. How does that compare to other competitors that they might have, like ZipRecruiter or Indeed, or like you mentioned Google? Like that's an aggregate, right? Like if you go to Google and search jobs near me, the list that is pulling is from all these other sites, right? Like you're going to see from every other job board. So is it better to just go to one of these aggregates? Like sometimes, one question I often have with these boards is you see jobs that are posted 20 days ago, 25 days ago, 30 plus days ago. Should people filter the results that they're finding in job boards for the most recent ones, or is it fairly common to have job postings open for a while?
I think in tech, it's very common to have job postings open for a while. It's a hot industry, right? The market's really hot right now. Whatever you are in your career, right? Like whether you're a more junior engineer or whether you're looking for like Harmeet. I mean, I think your engineering manager has been open for 30 plus days, right? I don't think that's a red flag. I just think that it means that, hey, the role's still open. We're still looking for the right fit for the company. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add to that. I feel like candidates feel like that. They're like, oh man, the job has been open for 90 days plus. That means that they probably have people in final stages. Yeah, maybe we do. But I don't think that's also a deterrent. It just means maybe we opened the posting before we had an interview process put in place, right? So we wanted to get the traction. So it took maybe a couple weeks to get the interview going, the process in place and training. That was the case for me in security. I had an opening it's been open for a while, but I didn't have a process in place. So we couldn't bring people in because I didn't have an interview process in place. So I don't think that's a deterrent. It could be we could have people in final stages, but I would still apply to those jobs.
I mean, how likely do you guys think that is when you apply for a job and it might not be available anymore for the company to sort of reroute the candidate to something else? Like, is that a fairly common practice in companies where they will say, oh, you apply for this, we fill that role, but here is this other opportunity? Or
no, for sure. Like internally, both here as well as other companies I've worked at, if a role gets closed down and there are other active candidates that either have applied or they might be in mid stages, if there's another role, like another full stack role for a similar full stack position, we will 100% roll those candidates over and then try to see if that would be of interest. Usually it'll be a little bit of a different team and maybe a different scope. And so obviously it would be a question for the candidate if it aligns with what they'd be wanting to do as well. But yeah, if someone's already in process and there's more roles to fill, they'll definitely have a chance at other opportunities, and usually even some opportunities might be a little outside their comfort zone. Usually that's how it works. It's rare that we find a perfect fit. I think in general it's sometimes hey, we think you might be interested in something like this. Would you be willing to take this on? Or here's an interview loop. Would you be interested in sort of tackling that? And so being open to and being flexible with interview processes will definitely, I think, be an attribute to have in terms of just getting a variety of opportunities and seeing what fits the best.
Just to piggyback off that, because that was really well said. I think, like, to add to that, like, recruiters, we do this, we help people match up with the job, and a lot of the time, a lot of recruiters have a lot of tenure and experience doing that. And so when you get that recommendation or suggestion, trust in that recommendation or suggestion, or at least enough to experience the interview loop, learn more about it, and see if it's a fit for you. Because at the end of the day, we want to provide people opportunities that's a good fit. It doesn't make sense for any recruiter to bring someone into a role that's not a good fit. So usually when you get that suggestion, it's coming from a good place. It's coming from I think your skill set might match with X. So if you're interested, let's try it out. The worst that can happen is you find out it's not a fit.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? Sort of thing. So mentality, I suppose. I think that's a good segue. We were talking about recommendations and how people, you might apply for a job and they tell you, hey, this is filled, or maybe this is not the right fit for you, but there's this other one that it is. If you get to that position, you're a candidate that has shown some potential, at least to the point where a recruiter will get back to you. Because, a lot of times you don't hear a lot. Like the process is not very transparent. Sometimes you would just get a generic email saying, we're moving on without you, right? Or like there was a lot of competition, there's a lot of applicants, whatever. Unfortunately this, unfortunately that. So if you get to that point, you're like, okay, yeah, I got a shot. How do you stand out as an applicant? What do you do to say, I should get this role? Is there any top, recommendations that you have, things that you think that work really well? Like links to portfolios, maybe asking the right questions, mentioning certain like keywords. Like, do recruiters listen for keywords? Like if you say certain buzzwords that are aligned with the job, is that a +1? How do you stand out?
Yeah,
waiting for somebody to go first.
I know. We didn't establish a good speaking order. I'll get this started and then kick it over.
You go first.
But yeah, so I think just in terms of standing out, asking questions is a great place to start. I think, Victoria, Harmeet, and I, when we're hiring for active roles, we're talking to a fair amount of folks throughout the day. Our portion tends to be a little bit similar. We're obviously talking about the role and the company. The thing that stands out for me with candidates is the ones that do ask questions, especially questions that aren't just like the boilerplate, stock questions that, you might read on like a top 10 Google search questions of what to ask a recruiter. Asking real questions about like, hey, I noticed you just started working there 3 months ago. How's that been going for you? Like asking a real question, like personal experience of how has my time here been going, is a great question to ask for a candidate, because it's a way to get some honest feedback on someone who's recently come aboard. But it also shows me as the recruiter that they're thinking about, wanting to be here for the right reasons. And so I think asking questions is just a great way to stand out once you get on the phone with recruiters. And again, that's not to say just ask a bunch of boilerplate questions, but especially when you're talking to a company that you really want to work at, think about why you want to work there. And, this is a chance to learn a little bit about it. So I would definitely say early on, asking those good questions is an awesome place to start.
Okay. Asking questions, a lot of questions, but questions that make sense, not cookie cutter questions like, oh, what is the thing that you like the least working at Codecademy? Try not to be too cliche. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I think for me, yes, big on the questions. I think we're all human, and I feel like sometimes recruiting can be seen as transactional. You get a candidate email, you talk to maybe a recruiter that is newer in the space and they're asking you more of those generic questions. So for me, honestly, candidates that stand out are people who like line up with our mission, right? So somebody who's done some research, we have a conversation. During the conversation, I get to learn a little bit more, aside from just like the tech skills, about how this person works with other teams and other people. And I'm assessing like, oh, are you a good fit for X team or maybe this team, right? So for me, it's kind of like that human touch. You don't need to, have like a list of your answers written down and be reading from a script. It's really finding that like right fit. And I don't know if that's like a really, like, I feel like it's a vague answer to give.
Well, I think it's a good answer if we put it in the context of when you apply for a role, there should be a reason you're applying for this role in particular, right? I feel like a lot of beginners apply for any role because all they're trying to do is get a job anywhere, any way they can, right? And the problem with that approach is that it's really hard to stand out when you're just trying, it's just 1 in a million, right? So I feel like those kind of questions, right? Like you can only ask the right questions if it's something that is really interesting to you. Like you've looked at Codecademy, for example, you've looked at what we work on, the courses, and you're like, yeah, I'm really interested in participating in this team success, in these projects, and tackling these issues, right? And then you get to ask those questions because you know why you're there. So I guess it's kind of like what you're saying is to ask those right questions. It also has to make sense to you, the candidate, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Anything to add, Harmeet?
It's a tough act to follow. They covered it pretty well. If it comes from a genuine interest, you will want to go out of your way to research the company and look up things that the company's doing, and then you can bring that up too. I guess the only thing I can add to this is like listen to what the recruiter says about the role. If they give you an explanation of the role, listen to what they're looking for in the role. And then when it's time for you to answer the recruiter or to talk about your experience and some of the things you do, try to make it match up as close as you can. Obviously, you don't want to stretch the boundaries and maybe fib about your experience. Like, don't do that. Talk to your experience and your experience only, but see if there's a way to frame it in a way that makes sense based on what the recruiter is looking for in the role and what a successful candidate might look like in that role too. And that might be a good question too to ask.
What if I take a step back, Harmeet? What if we go to the very beginning? Like, you're not talking to the recruiter yet. You're applying for the job. How do you stand out there? You haven't talked to the person. You don't get to use your charms and your smile and your smart questions about Codecademy. Like, how do you stand out then? Like, is this more of a game of keywords? Is there certain things like you have to tailor your portfolio to the role you're looking for, or you have to apply in the right places, or how heavy, how much weight does your cover letter have in that, right? Like, there's a lot of questions that surround how to stand out at the very beginning, where you're just a number in someone's list, right? What would you say in your experience, you three, are things that make people stand out more? Is it like resumes that are very clean, links to their LinkedIn pages in the resumes, or is it like mentions to portfolios? Is it the verbs they use in resumes, action verbs versus passive, things like that? Like, what would you say that's like the most things that you usually find at work?
Yeah, I would say in terms of the resume and tailoring it, that is something I tell everyone. You should definitely tailor your resume towards the job description you're applying to. If you just send a cookie cutter resume, odds are you're probably not going to get as many responses back as you'd like. So take a look at the job description, look at all the words that they use, and look at what they list out the most. I'm pretty sure you can get a sense of like what this job is really looking for based on how many times they repeat something or how many times something's listed multiple times. So you can get a sense of that. You can also get a sense of what the company is looking for by looking at like their about us, seeing their values, seeing what they care about, if they do pro bono work as well. There's so much you can learn from just exploring and researching the company page, what they do, what they've been up to in terms of the news. And so incorporating all of that information into your resume or your portfolio. And I would say there's some things that you can tailor in terms of your experience, in terms of verbiage, explaining it away. There's so many ways to explain one thing that you've done. So try and get creative with it. Maybe like have a Google draft of like different ways to explain the same bullet in your experience for one of your jobs, right? So the more you get used to that, the more you can kind of tailor your resume and your portfolio towards a job.
I'm going to plus one to that, Harmeet. I feel like the challenge is when you're writing your resume or your LinkedIn profile is like you assume that people know by one bullet what you're doing. And the thing is like for us who are doing searches, say in a LinkedIn, like maybe my search is a little different than like Will's search, right? And I'm using a different word and you just didn't rewrite that bullet 3 times. And now you lost your chance because you assumed that this would cover everything. You're like, oh, just because I wrote, that I work with, JavaScript, it's assumed that I'm working with different, frameworks of it, like Angular and, React. But don't assume that. And I can't plus one enough. Like you want to rewrite the same thing you're doing in a couple different ways because you don't know how you're going to come up in that search.
Yep. And then, there's lastly one thing to add, because I agree just in terms of how you frame the resume is super important for the jobs you're searching. But, especially if you're even early on and you don't have a lot of those bullets to even write, you're just getting started in your career, as a technology recruiter, looking at people's, active GitHubs or, personal sites if you're a mobile developer, like, have you published something to the App Store? Like, if you don't have the actual career experience, but can still show that you're actively coding, or if you're a designer, you're actively designing stuff, having a body of work to show that, hey, this is not only a passion for me, but this is something that I spend hours doing, is a great indicator of just how committed you would be, obviously if you're getting paid for it too. So I think just having some of those open source contributions and, personal projects, definitely GitHubs for engineers, those things will help you to get that, especially early on when you maybe don't have some of the years of experience. So definitely, be working on those side projects too, as much as you can. They're fun, and I think they'll also be super helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people forget that if you're recruiting for a junior role, the expectations are set for a junior role too. I feel like sometimes there's this huge imposter syndrome around the tech community where it's like, I haven't built enough portfolio projects. I don't know enough JavaScript. I don't know enough about this. I definitely don't know enough React, right? Like there's always this kind of like negative thoughts of like, I'm not good enough for this. And people kind of like keep themselves from applying for jobs because they just don't think that they're going to qualify or they're good enough for this. So the whole idea of, you take your portfolio and you showcase what you have and you just kind of like take a chance and understand that the recruiters on the other side also understand that they're hiring someone with no experience. So they're looking for other things, right? They're not looking for you to say you have 5 years of experience in this, because then it wouldn't be a junior role, right? Like the expectations come from both sides, right? So when you're building your projects, when you're building your resume, it's kind of like they also understand where you're coming from. It's not unreasonable, right? People are not being unreasonable. All right. Well, let's say that, okay, so we talked about how to stand out a little bit. I feel like to close this off and go for the Q&A, let's talk about what's out there. Okay, so full-time, part-time, freelance, contracts, open source. You are recruiters, you browse the internet all the time. You've gone through LinkedIn a million times. What is out there to get people started in their tech careers and the tech journeys? You could be a career switcher right now. You could be a teacher, accountant. You could be somebody right now, Starbucks. Like, how do you get started with this? How do you get the ball rolling? What's the best places, or what are the best things that you think are out there for this?
Taking some courses on Codecademy, of course.
Hell yeah. All right. Well said. That's it. That's the live stream. Thank you, everybody.
No, but dabbling, like dabbling into seeing what you're interested in. I have like a fun story. At my previous company, I hired a BI engineer, and this candidate was a manager of a movie theater for most of their career. And it was just a passion. She ended up taking a bunch of different courses and was like, I really want to get into tech. Like, I really want to do that. And so one of the questions I asked when, we're going through the interview process, I was like, why business intelligence? Well, there's so much. You could have been, a full stack engineer. You could have done database, right? Which I know BI kind of falls into that space, but like, what made you choose this? And she was like, honestly, I did a couple different like courses, and she ended up doing this boot camp. But before the boot camp, she was like, I did a little, like, I dabbled, and this was the thing that kept drawing me. So I think just like exploring your options, right? Like maybe, you tinker around with some front end and you're like, not really for me. I would like doing the back end stuff, or this language is, drawing me. And again, I feel like I'm giving very vague answers, but I think the passions kind of come out as you dabble, which is why I love Codecademy so much, because you can go on to our site for free, right? Or pay for the pro and look at the different options that you have. And you're like, maybe I'm doing some, I'm learning some React or some, Angular on the front end. And you're like, you know what? I don't really feel like this is fun or interesting. And so you move to, machine learning or data science, and you're like, wow, cool. I love math and statistics. This is great. Hopefully that's a good answer.
Any answer is a good answer.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Victoria, because when talking to candidates for so long, I feel like, especially senior engineers that have, been around the block for a couple years, they're scoping projects, they're doing more architecture, when they're going through the interview process and I talk to them about, how'd you get started in engineering, they always talk about it being more of a passion pull than anything else. They were either in a CS program or they were, doing a career switch, but something particular, fascinated them, and that's what they were drawn to, and that's what they were willing to spend the extra hours studying and getting really good at. And I think that's the one thing. There's a lot of jobs out there today, especially when it comes to engineering, but it's also pretty competitive. And I would say that like finding a way to really be that expert in, either if it's front end development or if it's, the specific database or whatever, finding what your passion is and then just diving into that is really what'll, help you down the line be able to actually, land those jobs you want, because it's going to be very competitive. And so I think, just following your passions is a great place to start. And then once you kind of figure out what, you really like, it might be hard to land that full-time job right away. Like realistically, that's just going to be hard, especially if you don't have a ton of like direct experience in that role. So, picking up freelance opportunities or, even if it's contract or part-time work, like I know here at Codecademy, we have different options on that side, but also a lot of other companies do too. There's different services out there that'll offer you just straight freelance work. And so like there's options out there to play around with, but it's a lot easier to do if you love what you're doing versus just trying to do it because you think it's going to pay you a bunch of money down the line. So definitely finding out what that is super important. I would agree.
Or like help a buddy out with a website. Like everybody's online now. So like, even if you're maybe not getting paid, like you said, well, like all of this money for it, like if you have the passion there, help your friend make a website for their business.
It's like photographers, you're getting paid in exposure, right?
Yeah.
No, but it's true. And then you put that on your resume. I feel, build a website for blah, blah, blah.
And
I feel like a lot of I feel like a lot of our users, especially the beginners or the ones looking for career switching into tech, I always like to explain this when we're going around the community, and is look at businesses that do this for a living, right? That get people into tech for a living, like boot camps. When you're in a boot camp, you go through an intense 12 weeks, and by week 6 or 7, they're already telling you to start writing your resume down. So if those people feel that they're ready, if those candidates feel like, hey, I've learned enough, or I've done enough, or this is my portfolio and I'm good to go. If that's what it takes for them to feel ready, then that should be what it takes for anyone to feel that they're ready. So even if you're learning on your own on Codecademy, you go through the full stack path or whatever, just think back of like, okay, if this was a bootcamp, what would be my next step? They will be telling me to start sending applications out. They will be telling me to start connecting and building my network. They would be telling me to make sure that my portfolio is posted on GitHub and sharing it, right? So sometimes I like to compare to those, because you are doing the same thing. You just don't have the bootcamp name behind you, and people sort of like lose perspective of like, that's what it takes. You do these things and people are landing jobs right now. So why wouldn't you, right? There's no difference. I mean, you guys are recruiters. Do you feel like when you see someone coming from a bootcamp, it gives them like a +1 or something? Is that like a strong differentiator?
I think it definitely helps compared to like absolutely nothing. Like I think, in general, I like, when most of the roles that I've worked on, historically, tend to be a little more on the senior side. But when you're looking at entry level or mid level, a boot camp is as good as any CS degree, as long as like the experience matches up and like, the timelines do as well. I think realistically, you can get a lot of the important information and get job ready at those boot camps. But like, what have you done with that? Did you use that to, build out this awesome open source contribution that thousands of people are using? Or did you spend weeks building out this awesome project on GitHub that you can show me to show my engineering manager to explain, hey, candidate X doesn't have 3 years of experience, but look what they built. Like if you can use that bootcamp knowledge to your advantage, just the way you could use like a CS degree to your advantage, you can still land that job. But it's just kind of like what you do with it, not necessarily like I don't know. Some people might be. I know some companies and some hiring managers maybe aren't as hot to trot on boot camps as a CS degree per se, but in reality, if you can code and you can write it, like you'll get the job.
If you can code, you get the job. How about that? It's like cooking. You can cook, you got the job. There you go.
Yeah.
I like it.
I think with the boot camps, it's really the hours that you put in to the boot camp, right? So at the end of the day, boot camp or not, if you put in the time, it's going to show in the interview process. A lot of people, I've definitely spoken to people who've gone through a boot camp and they've only prepared to like do well in the interview, but haven't really worked on their skill set that is assessed in the interview. So that's a key differentiator. You really want to just build that skill set that is going to be assessed in the interview itself, rather than trying to trying to prep for the interview as a whole, if that makes any sense. But it's really about the hours and the time that you spent in it. So if you put in the time and the work and you have something to show for it, like Will said, you have a project, you have something on your portfolio, and that's something we as recruiters can take back to our team and say, hey, again, the years of experience might not be there, but what they've built is incredible, just within the span of like how much the span of time they've been in the space. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
cool. All right, let's jump into some Q&A, because I feel like the questions probably have a lot to do with what we're talking about anyway. So let's see what people are saying. I'm going to go in order of like oldest to newest. So people in the chat right now, don't worry about it. I'll get to your questions. I'm just going to start from the very beginning. Early in our chat today, we had a user called Cyanine09 that asked, address hiring older candidates who are switching careers. So what are your thoughts as recruiters when it comes to age? And I mean, I'm assuming the default answer is it's not a factor, but it's still a concern. And I feel like people sometimes feel like tech, it's like a young person sort of job. So how would you talk to somebody that might be older trying to get into tech? What are your advice?
I love it. I think it's awesome. Like there's no number, there's no age. For me, when I see somebody who is doing a career change later on in their career, I'm like, wow, you must really have a passion for this. Because why would you change your career, your stable career, to make a completely big change? So me personally, I feel like I'm just assuming there's passion there. So non-factor, I think it's like a thumbs up for me. It's a green flag.
Yeah, and I would also agree. Yeah, it's not a factor. I think obviously the reason the question was asked is because probably sometimes it unfortunately maybe becomes a factor. And so the one thing that I would recommend is, if you're applying for jobs, that require, certain types of technologies, just learn the technologies the same way that any other candidate would. And that doesn't matter how old, like age doesn't matter, your ability to learn Jenkins if you're applying for a DevOps role or something like that. So what I've seen is that I think as long as, the aptitude's there, and like Victoria mentioned, the passion, as well as, the grasp of like the tools that it takes to do the job, age doesn't matter. And it's a bummer that the question, has to come up in the first place. But I think, companies are addressing it. It's something that does, is discussed about, internally, both, across the board. So I think, I think moving forward, hopefully it'll be a little bit less of an issue to land some of those jobs in tech.
Okay, let's move it on. So basically, it's not a factor. Obviously, we're talking from a US-centric point of view. It should be the same across the world, but unfortunately, different countries, different cultures, different expectations. Like we can't speak for everybody everywhere, but at least here in the US, I know that by law, you can't discriminate based on age, and just talent is talent. So if you're trying to apply for a company and they don't want you for the age, then you don't want to work there anyways. That's just not the place where you want to work at anyways. If that's their mentality, that's how they go through doing things. Another question. Where can I find a job in remote role, intermediate skills, and learn as I work? Okay, so this is multiple parts. Remote roles, intermediate skills, and learn as I work. So I guess the question is, how do you filter results in a way that maybe focuses on remote work or focuses in certain skills? The job boards that we were talking about before, like LinkedIn or any other job board, do they have this kind of tooling where you can say, I want remote only, or I want this, I want that?
Most job boards should have some type of filtering based on location. And now with everyone in this new age of working, probably have the option to work remote. So I would say odds are most companies, especially in the startup space in tech, are pro remote. There might be a few that are very much an in-office culture. And usually those companies are pretty explicit about that too. So there definitely are filters to filter out remote roles for sure. And I think if anything, if you read in the job descriptions themselves, they'll be very telling of like, oh, okay, this role is also open to, anywhere within the US or anywhere within X region. And if they are an in-office culture, odds are they're going to advertise that because they're trying to draw in people who want that too.
Okay. So basically there's filters you can use and just have to use them. I know that sometimes it's a little weird with the keywords. Like I remember somebody was talking about how you might be searching for a junior developer role, but a different company might call it software engineer 1. And this result is not going to show. You're looking for a keyword and you're never going to find that other job that is actually what you're looking for just because of the keywords, right? So I guess with the remote, it's the same. If it's remote, if it's hybrid, or if they call it something else, non-location, I don't know what keywords they use for.
Yeah. And one thing just to add there on that. So I remember the job seeker mentioned that they were like at an intermediate level and looking to learn. So one good question, if you get on the horn with some of the recruiters, is to ask about their internal like learning and development programs or professional development programs, because Codecademy is mostly a B2C platform where, we help just individual learners, but there's B2B companies out there that also offer similar types of products. So like there are options for companies to give you upskilling once you get in the door. And that's an example of a wonderful question to ask a recruiter to show that you're like interested in growing, interested in engaging, and also looking to learn a little bit more about like what the company has to offer. So definitely asking about some of those opportunities is totally fair game when you're having an intro with a recruiter.
Cool. All right. Question from Brittany Turcotte. Sorry if I pronounced your username wrong. The question is, I would love to hear any suggestions about how to navigate NDAs with portfolio work. I've done so much, but I can't legally show off. So how do you do that? Like, how do you showcase that you know how to build stuff, but you can't really show what you built?
This is tough because like, I'm going to say, I think most recruiters get it. I don't know, Harmeet, Will, have you jumped on a call when somebody's like, hey, I want to give you more details about this project I'm working on, but it's a government contract. So I can't. I think the best way to handle this is having those keywords. You can put like what you did without actually sharing that project. And I would put that on your resume, like due to DNA cannot share like links. So you're addressing it like, hey, I've done this and this is what I've done. I would give more detail, but unfortunately, legally, I can't actually share my portfolio on this project. But I think you can still talk about the tools you used and describe what you've done for that. And then bring it to head and just, be honest about, hey, I can't actually share this, but I've done X, Y, and Z.
Okay. So just, I guess, yeah, you can't talk about it, but you can still sort of talk about it. Wow, there's 2 Wills.
And you're on mute, Will.
Okay, so there was a question here. Yeah, so let me get back to the questions. Someone was asking about overseas opportunities. Now, when you're a recruiter and you're looking at these applications, is it important for you to see in the resume somewhere, maybe at the top, say something like, I can legally work in the US or something like, is that something that you need to disclose in your application process, or if you're applying, it's sort of understood that you can?
So some companies will handle it differently. Some companies will have it as part of their like initial questionnaire when applying, but it's usually something that'll come up on the intro call with the recruiter just to make sure that, it's a fit and that, the company would be able to offer you employment. But you don't have to disclose it on the resume if you don't want to, but it's something that will come up, pretty early on, usually the first call with the recruiter anyways.
I guess it depends on the company, right? Because I've seen job applications where the actual form, like the first contact that you have with the company, it will have a box that says something like, you say that you can legally work in this country or whatever. So I guess it depends on the process.
Right. Right.
Okay, more questions. Somebody had a question about, do you think it's okay to use Google Drive as a resume builder? Okay, so you go to your Google Drive, use one of the templates, resume template, fill it out. What's your thoughts on templates? Is that a negative? Is that a positive? Doesn't matter? Because my thought process is, if everybody's using the same template, then that means that the recruiter's eyes are sort of trained to go through the same sections. So that can be a positive, right? Because they don't have to fight to find the information. They know where the information is going to be in your resume. But at the same time, you could say, well, a template means that you didn't put any effort into this. Do you really want the job? So what's the stance on templates?
I feel like templates do nothing for me unless you're going for like a marketing role or a visual designer, maybe like UI designer, UX designer. Then I want to see like the pretty. I feel like maybe unpopular opinion, I hate templates. Give me just like a generic Google. I'm just looking for the words. I don't know. How do you guys feel, Harmeet? Well,
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't care the formatting. I'm more interested in the context. But I agree, for design special roles, like if you're going to get paid to make something look nice, you probably should make sure your resume looks nice as well. But otherwise, more interested in the content. And, if a template helps you get it out quicker to customize it, like Harmeet was mentioning earlier, then go for it. Make a bunch of templates and churn them out. That's fine by me.
I'm a stickler, unfortunately. And if your resume has poor formatting, like obviously you're not getting discounted for that, but I do look at that, and that's something I, keep in mind. But I would say this: think about it from the perspective of a recruiter. Like the more well laid out your resume is, the easier it is for them to find out where your skills are at, what you're experienced in, and for us to just get a sense of you as a person and your skill set as a professional. So resume templates do help to help like organize your thoughts, your experience, and the things you've done in your career. I'm a fan of them, but it's not going to be the end all be all factor as to why you get the role. That's definitely not it, but
Okay.
it helps organize your.
Well, I mean, obviously it's different. Poor formatting is different from template formatting, right? Like poor formatting, like if there are typos, if the type is so small that you can't read it, right? Like there's colors everywhere that you can't read. Like that's different than just saying Drive, new document, template resume. This is my name. That's what I did. Right? Like, are you saying that you consider poor formatting using templating, or
Some templates have it set up to where it's
some templates are bad?
Yeah, it's just really bad. I've seen some resumes that kind of look similar and they follow the same style, and I really don't know what they're doing, and you really have to look and dig through. So odds are you're going to find a good template that lays everything out. But if you somehow get a template that doesn't, just stick to the one where visually you can read everything.
Yeah. There's a question here in the chat from Aaron Gill that was asking about really creative resumes. And I think this goes back to Victoria, what you were saying about if the role that you're applying for requires you to be very creative, then the resume is an opportunity for you to showcase that creativity. But if you're applying for a very dry job, like you're going to be a developer and you're going to be on code all day, having really great graphics and stuff in your resume might not really give you any points in the application, right?
unless you're applying for Harmeet's role, because then, then you want a fancy resume. Yeah, I honestly think that like it just, you have to give to what job you're applying for. Something fun I did see in resume. So I do a lot of hiring for developers, full stack, front end, back end, all of that fun stuff. Is somebody had like some code in their resume, which I had to look up like what it meant, because obviously I'm not a developer, but I thought that was a fun way to stand out. I was like, oh, cool. Not their whole resume wasn't written in code, but there was like a little piece like that. Basically, if you looked it up, it said like, hey, I'm a software engineer. So I thought that was fun, right? And that was
All
a
right.
cool way to stand out, right? Like it drawed my attention because I was like, what is this?
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll be here for like almost an hour. Time flies when you're having fun with your friends. So thank you everybody for stopping by today and for asking all the questions in the chat. And thank you for the panelists for answering questions. I feel like we've covered topics that are so broad and there's so much that can be said about this that we could probably have these conversations every week for a year and we'll still have things to say and things to add, right? So thank you everybody for stopping by today and hopefully we answer some of your questions. We have all the communities in Codecademy where you can keep asking questions on our forums, on our Discord server. Go find us out on our chapters program. So happy to answer your questions and follow up offline after the event. Thank you everybody for stopping by.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.